Flames snapped through the wooden beams like angry whips, the night air heavy with smoke that clawed at my lungs. I clutched my baby boy against my chest, his tiny body shaking, his cries muffled in the crook of my arm as I stumbled down the stairs. Heat roared around me, and for a moment, I thought we'd both be swallowed alive. I kicked the front door open with every ounce of strength left in me, the cold night rushing over us like a cruel relief. I barely made it onto the porch when the door slammed shut behind me, locked, the metallic click loud against the chaos of fire. "Where the hell are you going?" my father's voice shouted from inside, rough and sharp, cutting through the smoke. I spun around, pounding on the door. My arms trembled as I held my baby tighter. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video. "Open it, please! The fire's everywhere! We need to get out!" I screamed, my throat raw, my voice cracking. From the other side of the door, my mother's laughter rang, cold and merciless. "You got your brat out, didn't you? Don't think you're done. Get back in there. Your sister's dog is worth more than you'll ever be." The words sliced into me deeper than the smoke, tearing my chest apart. I hit the door harder, desperate. "Are you insane? There's no time. The stairs are collapsing. If I go back, I'll—" Dad's voice came low, dripping with disgust. "Better you than her dog. At least he brings joy to this family. You? You've been a burden since the day you were born." I staggered backward, shaking, the weight of my child pressing against my pounding heart. My baby whimpered softly, clinging to my shirt like he could sense every ounce of terror radiating from me. Through the flickering windows, I saw them, my parents, pulling the curtains closed with deliberate cruelty, as if shutting me out wasn't enough, as if my screams were just background noise to their entertainment. I stood in the freezing night air, fire lighting up the sky behind me, the house I'd tried to call home turning into a furnace of betrayal. The neighbors began to gather, murmuring, their faces caught between shock and horror as they realized my parents had locked me out. But they didn't move fast enough, didn't speak loud enough to drown out the echo of my mother's words inside my head. "Save the dog first. Let the garbage rot." I pressed my forehead to my baby's soft hair, whispering through tears. "I'll never forgive them. Never." That night wasn't just fire consuming wood and walls. It was fire burning the last shred of hope I had left that my parents could ever see me as human. Standing barefoot on the icy ground, my child's cries cutting through the crackling flames, I swore to myself, if they valued a dog more than their daughter and grandson, I'd make sure that decision would be the one to destroy them. The fire department came, their trucks screaming down the street, lights flashing red against the smoke-filled night. Neighbors pointed, whispered, shook their heads, but not one of them knew the truth, not really. They saw me outside, barefoot, holding my baby, trembling, smoke clinging to my skin like a second layer. They thought maybe I was lucky to get out alive. What they didn't see was the way my parents had stood at the window with blank faces while I begged, pounding my fists bloody against the glass. They didn't hear my mother's sneer echoing like poison. "Better you die than her dog." The firefighters stormed inside, breaking down doors, dragging hoses. I screamed at them through tears. "My parents are still inside!" But part of me didn't mean it. Part of me wanted them to choke on their arrogance, to taste the smoke they forced me and my baby to face alone. Minutes later, they came out coughing, wrapped in blankets, faces covered in soot. My sister clutched her dog tight against her chest like it was a crown jewel. And my parents, they had the audacity to glare at me as though I had failed them. "You couldn't even go back in for him?" My mother spat, pointing to the stupid golden retriever wagging its tail in my sister's arms. I shook, cradling my baby closer. "I had your grandson in my arms. You locked me out. You could have killed us both." Dad sneered, his lips curling into that smirk I'd seen my whole life whenever he wanted to remind me I was nothing. "Don't play the victim. If you cared about this family, you would have gone back in. Instead, you stood out here like a coward." The neighbors turned, staring, murmuring. They heard his words. They saw me trembling, holding my baby, my face pale from smoke and humiliation, and I realized my parents weren't ashamed. They weren't even trying to hide it. They enjoyed the cruelty. For days after, the fire's damage was the least of my burns. My parents blamed me for everything. My mother stormed through the house ranting about how the smoke ruined her curtains, but it was my fault for panicking. My father grumbled about repairs and snapped that if I'd had any sense, the dog wouldn't have almost died. At night, I held my baby in the small room they'd shoved us into 4 peeling walls, a draft through the cracked window, a mattress thin as cardboard, and I listened to them celebrate saving the dog while mocking me. Finally, she showed what she is, Mom sneered one night at the dinner table, crying on the porch, useless. Garbage belongs outside, Dad added, chuckling, and she proved it. My sister, stroking her dog, smirked at me. He's worth more than your kid. At least he doesn't cry all the time. Their words carved into me, but I stayed silent. I stopped screaming, stopped defending myself, stopped trying to remind them that I existed, because silence was sharper than screams. Silence gave me room to think. I started noticing things. How my dad bragged to his buddies about being man of the house, but their debts stacked higher every week. How my mother lied about charity donations, skimming money for herself. How my sister paraded her dog everywhere, posting pictures online about her perfect life, while pretending I wasn't even her sister. They thought they had stripped me of dignity. What they didn't know was that I was storing every humiliation, every cruel laugh, every locked door. Each word they threw at me became kindling for a fire of my own, one I was going to ignite carefully, piece by piece. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. My baby had a fever. I begged them for help, for medicine, for a ride to the doctor. My mother waved her hand. Can't waste money on that. He'll survive, or he won't. Better than wasting our savings. Dad chimed in. If you want a doctor, walk. Maybe then you'll learn to be useful. I walked, 3 miles in the cold, my baby burning up in my arms. A stranger in the pharmacy saw my tears and bought the medicine for me because I didn't even have enough cash left. And as I walked home, clutching that medicine, the wind cutting across my face, I swore, I'm done letting them decide who lives and who's worth saving. The girl who used to beg them for scraps was gone. In her place was someone ready to dismantle everything they cared about, not with fists, not with screams, but with a plan so sharp they wouldn't see it coming. That was the moment revenge stopped being an idea and became a promise. I didn't strike back right away. That would have been too easy. My parents thrived on drama, on my tears, on my desperation. No, I starved them of it. I smiled when they spat venom. I laughed quietly when they mocked me. They thought I'd finally broken, but in reality, I was building. First, I started earning in secret. Every night after putting my baby to sleep, I worked online, freelancing, taking shifts at a diner across town. The exhaustion ate at me, but each dollar I earned was a step away from them. And I didn't just save, I watched them. I learned their weaknesses. My father's pride wasn't in money. It was in control. He strutted around as though the neighborhood bowed to him, as though every deal he made was legendary. But I learned the truth. He owed people. He had been borrowing, cutting corners, lying about his big wins. My mother's pride wasn't in her home or marriage. It was an image. She needed the neighbors to think she was perfect, that she ran the ideal family. She lived for whispers of admiration, for nods at church, for comments on her social media pictures. And my sister? Her pride was the dog. That golden retriever wasn't just a pet. It was her trophy. She used it to make herself look like a princess, the one with the perfect life. She believed it proved she was better than me, that even her animal was more cherished than my child. So I aimed for each of their thrones. It began with the neighbors. Subtle at first. I let comments slip small truths masked as casual talk. Oh, Dad's been so stressed about his debts. Mom's been so busy pretending everything's fine. Not accusations, just seeds. Seeds that sprouted into questions. People started looking at them differently. less with admiration, more with suspicion. Then I built alliances, the same neighbors they love to show off for. I started helping them babysitting their kids, running errands, lending a hand. They began to see me not as the shadow my parents painted me to be, but as someone real, someone dependable. Slowly, the spotlight shifted. The next blow came at my father's poker night. He loved to brag about his investments. I walked in with proof contracts he'd signed, debts he couldn't pay, loans he'd begged for behind closed doors. I didn't shout. I just laid the papers on the table in front of his friends and walked out. The silence behind me was louder than any scream. For my mother, I didn't need papers. All it took was a mirror. I caught her gossiping about other women at church, ripping apart families with her lies. I recorded her venom, not for the world, but for the very people she targeted. I played it quietly at gatherings, in kitchens, in whispers. By the end of the week, she was the one whispered about, her perfect image rotting in front of her eyes. And my sister? Her downfall was the cruelest because I let her do it to herself. She was obsessed with parading that dog everywhere, so I waited until the day of the community fair, the event where she always preened like a queen. When the judges came to see her dog, I stepped forward and revealed how she'd left my baby crying sick while pampering her pet, how she'd locked me out in the cold while clutching the retriever like a prize. The crowd gasped. Someone muttered, "She treats her dog better than a child." The judges didn't award her ribbon that day. They told her she was unfit for competition. Her dog wagged its tail, oblivious, as my sister sobbed not for me, not for the cruelty she'd shown, but for the humiliation of being stripped of her crown. By then, my parents were collapsing under the weight of their own reputations. Debts came calling, doors that once opened for them slammed shut, and the neighbors they relied on turned away coldly. Then came the final act. They cornered me one night in the kitchen, faces pale, eyes hollow. Dad slammed his hand on the table. "What did you do?" Mom's voice cracked. "We had everything, and now everyone looks at us like filth." I held my baby close, my voice steady, quiet, cutting. "You laughed while I begged in the fire. You spat on me while I walked miles for medicine. You cheered while I crawled on the floor, and you locked me out in the storm." "I didn't ruin you. You ruined yourselves. I just let the world see it." They stared at me, but there was no venom left, only fear, only the hollow ache of people who had lost everything they once worshipped. For the first time, I didn't feel small in that house. I didn't feel like trash at their feet. I felt tall, steady, untouchable. And then I left. I didn't run this time. I didn't crawl. I walked out carrying my baby, past the broken people who once claimed to be my family. They tried to call me back, their voices trembling, but I didn't even glance over my shoulder. Because the real fire was never the one that burned our home. It was the one I carried inside me, and it had finally consumed them. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video?